Welcome again, everyone. Today, we are going to talk, like I said, about the new features, and I'm your host. You might know me from previous webinars, and I'm the manager here in EGZOTech of the clinical team, and we are always happy to support you. And we're also responsible to deliver new things that you are requesting in the software, in the hardware. So we really value the relationship that we have with all the customers around the world, all the distributors around the world. So again, thank you for all the feedback we're getting from you so we can improve our devices and better help the patients. Today's goal of the webinar is to show you the new evaluation protocols and talk a little bit about the reports and let you know how you can update the devices you have. And at the end, we will have question and answer session. So with latest update in the software, all the customers and all the distributors received new exercises, which are called advanced EMG biofeedback, and we will talk about that at the very end as well. But also there is this opportunity to install, to download the four new tests that are available for Luna. And just let me tell you the story behind this. So as we know, the device can measure different things. So you can get the information about the resistance or the force that the patient is generating. You can also look into the EMG evaluation and all things like that. But so far, we did not have standardized protocols that you would be able to use in your everyday work practice, so they can be repeated after some time easily, and you can assess the patient's progress. So we decided to add some of the protocols that can help to evaluate and objectify everything even better. And here are our ideas for that. So we do have the initial evaluation, so a short, quick test for evaluation. Then we have some resistance evaluation, which is often connected with the spasticity, if there's a spastic patient. There is isometric force, so it will help you out with measuring this force in the patient. And the EMG, like maximum voluntary contraction evaluation, that also is a standardized protocol to do that. So let me start with the first evaluation. And this is something that our sales representative use a lot, and they are PTs as well, but they use it during their presentation for the customers because it's such a quick test and can help out with understanding of the device. So this is something that you can use during your work with the clinic. So this is some information for all the distributors today. And show them how quick the patient can be evaluated, how they can look into the results to see which Luna EMG exercises will be the most suitable for the patient. And this is a specific test that we develop, and you won't find it in the literature because we are the one that came up with it. But what do we measure in that test? So basically, the idea is to give you the quick information right away. Is there any movement that the patient is able to move a little bit? If there is a muscle force behind that, what is the EMG activity during that? Is there any? And you will get the values from those tests and the recommendation for the test. And the test step by step looks like that, and we will see it in the moment, that the patient has 3 repetition, and it just goes one way. The patient needs to be active, but going back to the initial position, this is something that the device is doing. And we have 3 repetitions, and we can look into the things that I just mentioned. So here's the quick view on how to perform the test. So like I said, we have EMG that we can put on the muscle, and we can put it either on one muscle or on more muscles at the same time. It depends what do we want to evaluate, but minimum 1 EMG channel has to be put there. We unweight, we unweight the limb. So this is standard procedure as you do with other exercises. Then we set the range of motion that is comfortable for the patient. And we choose which side it is, what kind of movement we want to evaluate, in which muscle we put on. So we want to also look into the muscle activity of that muscle during this movement. And like I said, first the extension goes to the initial positioning, and the patient needs to stay relaxed. And then during the active phase, the patient should go as fast as possible and hold the contraction. And then after the active phase, the extension will go to the initial position by itself. So like passive movement. So we ask a patient to do this movement 3 times. So we have 3 repetitions. And again, we are looking into the muscle force. So it will be a little bit of the isokinetic assessment. And we will look in the EMG activity. And we will see muscle force here, so the maximum force. Then we will see the recommendation for the exercises, and we will have the values for this active phase. And we can also look into the each of the repetitions separately. Perfect. And of course, after each evaluation, we can look into the PDF report. So for each repetition, we'll see how what was the force, like what was the level of the force, what was the activity level, and again, the recommendation for the exercises. Okay, perfect. So like I said, you will get the PDF with after each test, and it will recommend you the exercises to use on Luna for this patient. And you get the information, is the patient innervated, can the patient maintain the contraction? And those are important information for choosing the right options. For example, in the trigger and hold exercises, do we go with trigger and hold or trigger and release? So this is a clue for you which exercise to use as well. And there will be some torque information. So there will be average force that the patient generated. So like isokinetic muscle force. We will have the maximum value that the patient got. There are also some additional timing values. So the onset is the time how fast this was achieved, the maximum value. And was the patient able to hold the force, the contraction during the whole active phase. So this is the time when there was force generated. How long was the force generated? And there will be also EMG values out there. So the average, the maximum value. There is this additional thing that we can look at, which is variability. And this is actually how this is the coefficient of variation. And I put some information about that down here, but from our perspective is how stable is the contraction, right? So if those numbers are high, that means that the activity was like really bouncing back and forward. If they are lower, then the contraction was more stable. And also we get those timing values. So how fast was the maximum value achieved? And how long was it hold the activity during this active phase? And we look at the graphs, and then here we see it even more clear. So you look at here we have biceps and triceps activity during this evaluation. And each of the repetition, you can see what was the maximum force for each repetition, and it's a isokinetic movement. So this is the isokinetic evaluation of the force. Okay, the second test is about measuring the stiffness or the spasticity, but of course we here are going to say more about looking more closely into the resistance, because if this is a spasticity or stiffness, this is a clinical evaluation, so this is more from a clinical point of view, but the device will give you numbers. So we look into the resistance during the 3 velocities, so 10, 50, and 100 degrees per second, and then we will be able to look more into this resistance. As we know, the spasticity is velocity dependent, so we should see some interesting stuff here. And the patient just needs to be relaxed the whole time, and we have 30 seconds break between the repetition. Okay, and this is how the test looks like. So again, this is pretty simple, and if you're using Luna already, that's nothing that would be challenging for you. It's something that you're pretty familiar. So we're choosing the muscle spasticity test, and we again unweight the limb. We should remember to always be in the green zone during the unweighting process. And also patient needs to be relaxed. They should not hold it up or down or push it. They just need to be relaxed. And again, we're choosing the side, the movement we're assessing, and the biceps here as a muscle that we want to look into. Okay, and then we go with the flow. So we have first the extension goes to the initial position. We can also, position the limb right away at the beginning, and we're the device will passively move the limb. So on the left side, you can see what is the speed of this movement and what is the next phase, and between the phase there are 30 seconds break. So the muscle is able to really relax between the repetition. And then the third is the 100 degree, and we can look into the summary at the very end. So we will have the average maximum hold time for each of the contractions, and we can then see if there was any abnormal hold of the spasticity. So here, those values are more or less normal. There is not a big peak both in the torque and the EMG. But let me discuss this also based on the literature in a moment. Okay, we can look in each of the repetition and see what was the torque and what was the EMG activity. Okay. And what do we get? We get the summary that will give us the peak information, was the peak force during the passive exercise. So we look at the clockwise torque here. This is the Luna clock, right? And if the movement was towards extension and the clockwise torque was going this direction, that we know this was resistance. It was against the movement, and it was clockwise torque that we are recording here. And we get the values for each of the speed, the average, maximum, and the hold time for each contraction. I put some additional information here. So again, if you have the presentation, you can always go back to what does exactly which value means. So according to literature, when we look at the resistance value, we really look at the mechanical changes in the joints. And when we look at the EMG readings, we might see some reflexes during the spasticity. And this is why we put the numbers both for resistance and for EMG. So we will look into those for the different speeds each time during the active phase mostly, right? Because that's the time where the device is moving the limb. And again, we will have some of those values that we know already from other tests put here. So also the timing, so how fast the muscle achieved the maximum values, how fast was it relaxing after repetition, and how long was the muscle active during the repetition. And the best, we can look at the graphic screen and see, like, this is the example when we try to a little bit mimic the spasticity. So here there is like a peak of the spasticity here, and in the torque, and with the EMG. So this is how we can look in our patients to see if those values will change. And what's the literature saying about this? So there are a couple of work done on the spinal cord injury, on the stroke, on the cerebral palsy patients, when they were trying to see if you can quantify the spasticity. A lot of it is still ongoing research. So this is quite something that we look at in the previous years, and new devices are arriving at the market, also trying to measure that. But most of the time, it's the devices like Luna or other isokinetic devices combined with EMG. So then you need two of them at least, or Luna. And then you can look at the values of the both torque. So here we have peak torque and mean torque, and they were trying to match it with the modified Ashworth scale. So here you have spinal cord injury patients with the Ashworth 1 would be the black dots, like you can see it down here. And you can have the modified Ashworth scale 2, 3, which will be the black squares. So basically we can see some correlation with the Ashworth scale, that especially with the peak torque. This is something that can be seen in the higher velocities, so around 100, 120 even for this particular research. So yes, because that's always a question, like how those two values are correlated. And you can see that for the speeds of 90, 120, the peak torque reached around 12, 14 for the modified Ashworth scale 2, 3. So if you ask about some, let's say, reference data, you can also look about on the controls where they were healthy controls. So you can see that for some speeds, even with the healthy patients, there is some peak torque being seen. So, but this is like up to 6, 8 Newton meters. It might be even something, let's say, normal values. But with the higher Ashworth, so 2 and 3, you will get around 12, 14 of the peak values in the extension. And those numbers for deflection. And this was done for lower limb, so not upper limb, but lower limb. And they also look at the EMG during those speeds. And you can see that for the EMG was seen mostly for the higher EMG, higher Ashworth scale. So 2, 3 was giving you some reflex EMG activity. And like down below, you will have slower speeds, and up here you will have quick speeds. And then you can see, especially from the hamstring muscles, when you evaluate spasticity in the lower limb here, you will have the activity, which is like a reflex EMG activity. And also for quadriceps, in that case, they reached some EMG reflex activity for the speeds 90, 120. So definitely the higher speeds show more of the reflex EMG activity. Okay, so the third test that we add to the system was that we can look also at the isometric force, and we can evaluate the muscle force through that, and during that the maximum voluntary contraction, and we can do this test for elbow and the knee. And here we have the test. So if you don't want to evaluate the EMG activity and you only want to go with the parameters of the force, then you will use this test. So force isometric test. Because for this test, this is optional to add the EMG to the evaluation, but you don't have to. So if you're like in a hurry or you don't want to look into activity, then you can just measure the muscle force, the isometric muscle force. And again, we unweight, we set the range of motion, and we are choosing into the software the site. And if we put the EMG on the muscle, we don't have to, like I said, so then we can just start with the test. And the Luna will position the upper limb, so that in this case, the elbow in 90 degrees positioning. So automatically it will go to 90 degrees. And in the lower limb, it will go more to the neural position of the lower limb, also to perform this kind of test, both direction, flexion and extension. And there are 30 seconds break between this assessment. So 3 repetitions with the breaks. And again, we will look at the torque values for the force. So pretty simple test, just to look at the isometric force for one direction. But if you want to go through the EMG data as well, then you can either use this program with the EMG or choose the maximum voluntary contraction, the second program that we have, which looks exactly the same like that. So I won't go through the details, but it just looks the same. But then you have to put the EMG values, right? So here you have the force for the lower limb. There are also some tests for other extensions. So just to show you some positioning for all those tests, how to position your patient. Obviously, you have to have the special chair that we provide. So we call it mesos. So the patient is well fixated, and your measurement will be even more precise. And in terms of the maximum isometric force, here we have for each repetition the isometric force presented on the graph. If we put EMG on, we also can look into the activity of the muscle. And in this case, if we put both biceps and triceps, then we can both look at those too. And the values in the reports will be the same as mentioned before. So we get the average, maximum, the variability of the contraction, and the timings. So how fast is muscle achieving the maximum values, or how fast is the muscle relaxing after that. And also we can look at the average and maximum values. So we can compare the muscles. So in that case, those were antagonists. So if we look at the agonists, so for example, the heads of the quadriceps, we can also compare the activity of both those heads. And we know that, let's say, up to 20% of the difference is more or less the norm. Whatever is up, then it's the difference between the activity. And here I've put some research for normative data for elbow flexion extension and knee flexion extension, because you always also ask for some reference. So here there are. And the new tests are applying for different extensions. So like I told you, for isometric test, this will be elbow and knee, and maximum voluntary isometric contraction also for those extension. But the other tests are for either all of the extensions or almost all of the extension. Okay, and whoops, sorry. And the last but not least, what I mentioned at the beginning, all the customers receive this automatically. So you always were also wondering how to adjust the EMG biofeedback in Luna EMG even better. So we can really provide patients with some guide when to contract, when to relax. So what we have is that we put some of those advanced EMG biofeedback, so to help you better assess the pelvic floor or some fatigue, endurance and timing, and so for you to have some custom trainings. And you can find it in the section here, advanced EMG biofeedback. And we will have out there some evaluation. Well-known Glaser protocol that you know from our other device, Stella Bio. And we have some presets, protocols for different evaluation. And here you will have the name of the test and the description and what is the timing of each of those programs. And the exercises, there are also presets. So for like 5-second work, 5-second rest, quick flicks. So this is something that is already preset, so you can use it for the trainings. But you can also do some custom programs, so you can add a new program. We can do it either on adjust basic information or advanced information. So we can choose how many repetition we have, work time, rest time, and we will add it here. So this is a custom program that we can use for training. And so like just to summarize, why would we use those tests or protocols for evaluation? So obviously to evaluate the patient before and after therapy, to better adjust those exercises that we use in Luna to the patient. We can detect the spasm either through torque or EMG values, especially in those with higher Ashworth. And we can, assess when they occur during the movement, because we also will get some the data about the angle in which the spasm catch. And we can look into the muscle force and see some normative values for our patients. And how to get this package update for your device. So I would suggest to contact your EGZOTech, right? So in terms of the Asia, it will be the Sergi, right? And for Europe, it's Milena. For Czech, it's Anna. For Italy, it's Simone. So you can contact your EGZOTech, and they will need from you your tablet serial number, and will provide you a special code that you will be able to enter your Luna EMG, and you will get those tests. And I encourage you to test those tests and give us your feedback, because we still work on them, so they are even better for clinicians, right? So they're not only good from the engineer perspective, but we adjust them to different patients, and we with your feedback we can improve this even better, and then we will implement those changes later, and so those evaluation protocols will be great. Also, if you're thinking about more of the providing more research, or you're thinking about the next project you would like to do, all of those tests to be able, so we are able to use them in the research. It's great if we could cooperate with some of you in terms of validating them for how they are repeatable, and if they're great for research. So from a device perspective, they count everything quite nicely. But of course, it's great to work with them on the patients. And during the upcoming weeks, we will test patients with those tests, but we just wanted to share with you the same. So again, if you will receive the code, you're able already to test them and give us some of your insight as well. And again, if you want to do the research, you can contact me directly, and we can think about a nice validation protocols that will, help out those tests to be even used wide by the researchers all over the world. Perfect. Okay, so we got to the question and answer section. So feel free right now to write down your questions in the question and answer. So I will look into them and hopefully be able to answer them right away. And I also see on our participants list Bogumiła and Justyna, which there are researchers from Poland who already took some of those tests on their plate, and I think soon we'll be publishing some of the materials. So there are some things that you will be able to use right away. But again, if you want to reach out in terms of research projects, feel free to. Good. Anything that I can answer your question today? I think also that this is the first webinar from this topic, and I would like to share with you whatever we come next. Some patient examples, some patient findings. So you will even have more things to share with your customers, and you, if you're a physios, to have more inside knowledge from other clinics on what do they discover. But basically, it's all about quantitating spasticity, quantitating the force, quantitating the activity of the muscles, so we can reach out, so we can put the data together. Okay, there's one question here. So the whole time of torque, the baseline is what % of the peak torque? We counted that if the torque will exceed 1.1 Newton-meter, then we start counting the whole time, and if this will decrease 0.9 Newton-meters, it will finish counting the whole time. This is our like a torque threshold that we add to those tests to hold that, to count the hold. All right. And again, feel free to reach out on the either my personal email here, annapoświata@egzotech.com, to ask other questions or to get the presentation or things like that. Or if you, again, want to start some research, you can reach out through this email. So if there's something that you will think about after the webinar or after you will download the new test or work with the advanced biofeedback on the Luna EMG, whatever comes to your mind later, this is something you can reach out. Yeah, there's a question, are we going to discuss about reading the evaluation reports? So like today, I showed you a little bit about how this is, what values there are there. But then if we will have some patient cases next time, then we can go more deeply into the reports. But basically, from the reports, you can always read the values of the force and compare it before and after the training. And you can look at the EMG activity and also look if the patient starting to activate the muscles more, have a longer contraction time, more stable contraction time. If the spasticity went down in terms of torque and there is no like EMG reflexes anymore, and let's say they used to be. So this is also something that's it's a progress. So this is like a more or less for understanding what we are looking at the screen, because this is always something that you need to do first. So you need to ask yourself first, what do you look into and why? And different patients, you might look for different things, right? Because also the spasticity from the spinal cord injury will differ from the stroke spasticity or with the cerebral palsy. So basically, if you're more into this one patients group, you should be able to know what you're looking at and what are you looking for. And then when you ask a question, then the device will help you answer the question, right? So always remember that numbers won't tell you anything unless you have a hypothesis beforehand, right? So, and then according to the hypothesis, then you can answer clinically based on the numbers. But again, different patients have different things to look at. But like I said, hopefully we can meet again, not in a long time. We will gather as a clinical team patient examples for you, and then we can discuss each example and look at the findings and help you understand even better how this can be useful for your everyday work. Perfect. Thank you so much for today. Let's stay in touch. Contact your EGZOTech, download your new protocols, try them on you, and let's discuss them also, via email or via personal calls. Encourage you to do so. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, and I talk to you next time. Bye-bye.